Welcome to HOA Spot. The missing item was not missing, it was stashed. I need you to acknowledge the notice. That was Stephanie Kessler, Social Committee Chair for Silver Oak Community Association in Tucson, Arizona, standing on my driveway at 9 in the morning waving a printed sheet in my face. She had a red folder tucked under one arm and a look on her face like she had just won the lottery. Behind her, a tow truck idled at the curb, yellow lights flashing. I am a data analyst. I live alone in a modest townhome near the east side of the development. My finances cannot handle surprise fees and tow costs, so when Stephanie showed up with a tow driver and started shouting that I was about to learn how fast fees stack when she is in charge, I knew this was going to be bad. The tow driver, a middle-aged guy with grease on his hands and a clipboard, looked uncomfortable. He glanced at me and said someone called in a complaint about me. Stephanie smiled like she had just been given a microphone. I said I had no idea what complaint she was talking about. Stephanie cut me off and said I do not make the rules, I enforce them. She said the association had received multiple reports that I was stealing from cars in the visitor lot at night. She said a glove box had been rifled and a bag of new pool wristbands was missing. She said she saw me near the vehicles late one evening, and that was all the proof she needed. I said that was insane. I had never touched anyone's car. I worked from home and I kept to myself. Stephanie said she is authorized to decide evidence, not management. She said her job as social chair gave her oversight of community safety, and that included investigating theft. The tow driver shifted his weight and said he just needed to know if the vehicle was staying or going. Stephanie told him to wait. She said I needed to acknowledge the notice first, or she would add a no trespass warning from the clubhouse and office areas to my file. I asked to see the complaint. Stephanie opened the red folder just enough to show me a single printed page with lines of text I could not read from where I stood, then snapped it shut. She said the details were confidential, but the consequences were not. She said if I did not sign the acknowledgement right now, she would escalate to management and recommend an emergency hearing with a fine structure that would make my head spin. I said I was not signing anything without seeing the actual complaint and talking to management myself. Stephanie said, "You are lucky I am not harsher." She said most board members would have called the police already. She turned to the tow driver and told him to note the refusal to cooperate in his report. The tow driver looked at her and said he did not write those kinds of reports. He said his job was to move vehicles, not document disputes. Stephanie's face flushed. She told him this was an official association matter and he was contracted to follow her instructions. The driver said his contract was with the tow company, not with her personally, and if there was no illegally parked car, he was leaving. Stephanie said there was a car. She pointed at my sedan, parked in my own assigned spot, and said it was in violation of the guest lot policy. The driver looked at the painted number on the curb, looked at my address on his clipboard, and said that was not a guest spot. He said he was not towing a car from an assigned residence space without a written work order from management. He climbed back into his truck and drove off. Stephanie spun back to me and said this was not over. She said she had documentation and witness statements, and the board would hear about my refusal to cooperate. She said I had until midnight tonight to submit a written response to the theft allegation, or my gate access would be suspended. She said the HOA threatens to suspend my gate access at midnight, and if I thought she was bluffing, I could test her and find out. I said I would be at the management office as soon as it opened. Stephanie said good luck with that. She said the office was closed for inventory today and tomorrow, and by the time they reopened, my deadline would have passed. She said management sends contradictory instructions like a trap, and I was about to learn how that felt. She walked back to her car, got in, and drove off. I stood there for a minute trying to process what had just happened. Then I went inside and started making calls. The first thing I did was call the management office. I got voicemail saying they were conducting an inventory audit and would reopen in 2 business days. I left a message explaining the theft accusation and the midnight deadline and said I needed to speak to someone immediately. Then I called the tow company. I explained what Stephanie had tried to do. The dispatcher said they had a contract with Silver Oak, but it required written authorization from management, not verbal orders from committee chairs. She said if Stephanie called again, they would refer her back to the office. She also said she would note the incident in their log in case it came up later. I sat down at my desk and opened the Silver Oak resident portal. I pulled up my account and checked for any notices or violations. There was nothing. No new messages, no pending fines, no hearing scheduled. I took a screenshot with the timestamp visible and saved it. Then I went back through my own records. I keep a detailed log of my comings and goings because I had issues with a previous HOA that tried to claim I was violating quiet hours. I pulled up my calendar and my phone location history for the past 2 weeks. Every night, Stephanie claimed I was near the visitor lot. I was either at home working late or at a coffee shop on the other side of town. I had receipts, timestamps, and GPS pins. I also checked my doorbell camera footage. I have a camera that covers my front door and part of the shared walkway. I went back 2 weeks and started scrubbing through the clips. Most of it was just me coming and going, a few delivery drivers, and the occasional neighbor walking a dog. But then I found something strange. 3 nights ago, around 11 p.m., Stephanie walked past my door. She was carrying a shopping bag and looking around like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. She went down the walkway toward the visitor lot. About 20 minutes later, she came back without the bag. The timestamp was clear. The lighting was good. I saved the clip. I kept looking. 2 nights before that, same thing. Stephanie walking past my place late at night, this time carrying a small cardboard box. She went toward the lot and came back empty-handed. I saved that clip too. I printed both clips with the timestamps and added them to a binder I was starting to build. I labeled the binder with colored tabs: timeline, witness statements, communications, evidence. The pages inside were mostly blank for now, but the structure was there. Then I started reaching out to neighbors. I sent a message in the private neighborhood chat asking if anyone else had experienced theft or missing items recently. Within an hour, I had 3 responses. One person said a package was taken from their porch. Another said they were missing a small cash box from their car. A third said someone had gone through their glove box and taken nothing valuable, just registration paperwork and a pack of gum. I asked if anyone had doorbell footage or security camera clips from the past 2 weeks. 2 people said they would check and get back to me. One person said they saw Stephanie walking around the visitor lot late one night and thought it was weird but did not think much of it at the time. By mid-afternoon, I had a decent file started. I had my own alibi with timestamps and receipts. I had 2 doorbell clips showing Stephanie near my place at odd hours. I had witness reports of other thefts. I had the tow company dispatcher's statement that Stephanie tried to order a tow without proper authorization. Then my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I answered. A woman's voice said she was calling from the clubhouse and that Stephanie had asked her to follow up on a harassment complaint. She said I had been sending messages in the neighborhood chat that were creating a hostile environment and Stephanie wanted it documented. I said I had not harassed anyone. I said I was gathering information about a false theft accusation. The woman on the phone said she was just passing along the message and that Stephanie had asked her to label my dispute as harassment. I asked who she was. She said she was a part-time staff member who helped with clubhouse events, and that Stephanie had asked her to make the call as a favor. I said this was not appropriate and that I would be reporting the call to management. The woman hesitated, then said she did not want to get involved and hung up. I added a note to my binder under Communications, attempted vendor pressure via clubhouse staff. By evening, I had more footage. One of my neighbors sent me a clip from her driveway camera. It showed Stephanie walking through the visitor lot around midnight 2 nights ago. She stopped at a sedan, looked around, then opened the driver door. The door was unlocked. She reached inside, grabbed something from the glove box, and walked away. The timestamp was clear. The lighting was decent enough to see her face and her tan rain jacket. I saved the clip and added it to the binder. I also printed a still frame showing her face and the open car door. By 10 p.m., I had a thick binder with tabs and printed evidence. I had my alibi, the doorbell clips, the driveway footage, the tow company statement, and witness reports from 3 neighbors. I also had a written timeline showing that every theft Stephanie reported happened on nights when I was provably somewhere else. I sent a formal email to the management office with all the evidence attached. I copied the board president and the property manager. I explained the false accusation, the attempted tow, the harassment call, and the midnight deadline Stephanie had imposed. I said I was requesting an immediate investigation and a formal retraction of any allegations against me. Then I waited. At 11:50 p.m., I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You missed the deadline. Access suspended at midnight. Enjoy walking." I took a screenshot and added it to the binder. The next morning, I tried my gate remote. It did not work. I drove to the front gate and had to use the call box to get a temporary code from the after-hours service. The operator said my account was flagged for administrative hold and I would need to contact management to resolve it. I drove to the management office. It was still closed for inventory. A sign on the door said they would reopen the next day at 9 a.m. I went to the clubhouse instead. I figured I could at least talk to someone in person and get the situation on record. When I walked in, Stephanie was standing in the lobby talking to another resident. She saw me and her face lit up like she had been waiting for this moment. She said, "You are not supposed to be here." She said I had a no trespass warning from the clubhouse and office areas and that I was violating it by being on the property. I said I had never received any such warning. Stephanie pulled out her phone and said she had documentation. She opened her photo roll and showed me a picture of a printed notice with my name on it. The text was too small to read, but the header said "Trespass Warning" in large letters. I said I needed a copy of that notice delivered to me properly before it had any legal weight. Stephanie said she sent it via email and certified mail, and that was all the procedure required. I checked my phone right there. No email. I asked for the tracking number for the certified mail. She said she did not have it with her, but it was on file. The other resident, an older man I recognized from the pool, said this seemed excessive. He asked Stephanie why she was pushing so hard. Stephanie said I was under investigation for theft and that she had the authority to restrict access during an active case. The man looked at me and asked if that was true. I said no, and that I had evidence proving I was being framed. Stephanie laughed. She said framed was a strong word and that I should be careful about making accusations. She said I do not make the rules, I enforce them, and if I had a problem with her enforcement, I could take it up with the board at the next meeting in 3 weeks. The older man said 3 weeks was a long time to lock someone out of common areas. Stephanie said that was the policy and she was following it to the letter. If you are enjoying this wild HOA revenge story, hit that like button and subscribe for more satisfying payback content. I said I was not leaving until I spoke to someone with actual authority. Stephanie said she had actual authority and that I was trespassing. She pulled out her phone and said she was calling the non-emergency line to have me removed. The older man stepped between us and said that was not necessary. He said he was on the board and that he would make sure this got sorted out. He looked at me and said I should go home and come back when the office reopened. He looked at Stephanie and said she should stop making threats and let management handle it. Stephanie said she was handling it. She said the board gave her enforcement discretion, and that included access restrictions. The older man said the board gave her event planning discretion, not law enforcement powers. He said if she kept pushing this, he would call an emergency meeting and have her removed from the committee. Stephanie's face went red. She said, "You do not have the votes for that." The man said, "Try me." He turned to me and said, "Go home, document everything, and come back tomorrow when the office is open." He said he would make sure the manager knew what was happening. I left. I went home and added the clubhouse confrontation to my timeline. I also sent the older man a thank you email with a copy of my evidence binder attached. That night, Stephanie posted in the neighborhood chat. She said there had been a rash of thefts in the community and that residents should be vigilant. She said the association was working with law enforcement and that anyone with information should contact her directly. She said a suspect had been identified and that charges were pending. She did not name me, but she did not have to. 3 people messaged me privately asking if I was okay and if I needed help. One person said Stephanie had been asking around about me and spreading rumors that I was a thief. Another person said Stephanie had tried to recruit them to file a complaint against me, but they refused because they had never seen me do anything wrong. I took screenshots of the chat post and the private messages and added them to the binder. The next morning, I was at the management office at 8:55 a.m. The doors opened at 9. I walked in and asked to speak to the property manager. The receptionist said the manager was in a meeting but would be available in about 30 minutes. I said I would wait. At 9:30, the manager came out. Her name was Laura. She was in her 40s, professional, and looked tired. She said she had received my email and the board members' follow-up and that she needed to hear my side in person. We went into her office. I laid out the evidence binder on her desk. I walked her through the timeline, the doorbell clips, the driveway footage, the alibi receipts, the tow company statement, and the witness reports. I showed her the text about the suspended gate access and the photo of the trespass warning Stephanie claimed to have sent. Laura went through the binder page by page. She asked clarifying questions. She took notes. She pulled up my account on her computer and confirmed there was no formal violation on file, no hearing scheduled, and no authorized trespass warning. She said the access suspension was done manually by someone with admin credentials, but there was no case number or approval signature attached. I asked who had admin access. Laura said the board president, the treasurer, and 2 committee chairs, including Stephanie. I asked if committee chairs were supposed to suspend access without board approval. Laura said absolutely not. She said access restrictions required a formal vote except in emergency safety situations, and even then the board had to ratify it within 72 hours. Laura made a call. She put it on speaker. She called Stephanie and asked her to come to the office immediately. Stephanie said she was busy with a site walk for an upcoming event. Laura said this was not optional, and that if Stephanie did not show up in the next 30 minutes, Laura would refer the matter to the board for a formal hearing with potential removal. Stephanie said fine and hung up. 20 minutes later, Stephanie walked into the office. She had the red folder under her arm and a printed packet in her hand. She looked at me and said, "I did not realize we were having a group session. Laura said we are having a fact-finding meeting and you are going to answer some questions." Stephanie sat down. Laura asked her to explain the theft allegation. Stephanie opened the red folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. She said she had received reports from multiple residents about missing items and suspicious activity near the visitor lot. She said she personally observed me near the lot on several occasions late at night, and that my behavior was consistent with someone casing vehicles. I said that was a lie. Laura asked if Stephanie had any evidence. Stephanie said she had the reports. Laura asked to see them. Stephanie hesitated, then handed over the sheet. Laura looked at it and said, "This is a blank incident form. There are no names, no dates, no details." Stephanie said the details were verbal and confidential. Laura said verbal reports do not justify access suspension or trespass warnings. She asked if Stephanie had filed a police report. Stephanie said she was handling it internally first. Laura said that was not how theft investigations work, and that if Stephanie genuinely believed a crime had occurred, she was required to involve law enforcement, not take enforcement into her own hands. Laura then asked about the gate access suspension. Stephanie said she used her admin credentials to flag my account as a precaution. Laura said that was a violation of the access policy and that Stephanie did not have the authority to do that unilaterally. Stephanie said she was protecting the community. Laura turned her monitor around and showed Stephanie the screen. She said according to the audit log, Stephanie accessed my account 6 times in the past week, including twice after business hours. Laura asked what Stephanie was doing. Stephanie said she was monitoring for compliance. Laura said monitoring does not require logging in after midnight and changing account flags without documentation. Stephanie said she was doing her job. Laura said her job was event planning, not resident surveillance. Laura then asked about the doorbell footage and the driveway clip. She said she had reviewed the files I sent and that they clearly showed Stephanie near the visitor lot and inside a vehicle on nights when thefts were reported. Stephanie said the footage was taken out of context. She said she was conducting a security walk and checking for unlocked cars as a community service. Laura asked why Stephanie did not report those walks or coordinate with management. Stephanie said she did not think she needed to. Laura said you need to if you are going to access resident vehicles. She said what the footage actually showed was Stephanie entering a car without permission, which was illegal. She asked if Stephanie had taken anything from the vehicle. Stephanie said no. Laura asked if Stephanie had the bag of pool wristbands that was reported missing. Stephanie said she did not know anything about pool wristbands. I opened my binder and pulled out a printed photo. It was a still frame from another neighbor's camera showing Stephanie walking past the clubhouse storage closet 2 nights ago, carrying a small zippered bag. The timestamp was visible. I slid the photo across the desk. I said that bag matched the description of the missing wristbands. Stephanie said that was not the same bag. Laura asked if Stephanie had been in the storage closet recently. Stephanie said she had access because she was on the social committee and that she used the closet to store event supplies. Laura asked if she logged her visits. Stephanie said she did not have to. Laura picked up the phone and called the clubhouse. She asked the front desk to check the storage closet inventory log and see if anyone had checked out pool wristbands in the past 2 weeks. She waited. The front desk said the log showed no checkouts, but a bag of wristbands was missing and had been reported the day before. Laura looked at Stephanie and asked where the wristbands were. Stephanie said she did not take them. Laura said the footage and the timeline suggested otherwise. Stephanie said the footage was not conclusive. Laura said it was conclusive enough to refer to the police if Stephanie did not cooperate. Stephanie stood up. She said this was ridiculous and that she was being attacked for trying to protect the community. She said I was clearly the problem and that Laura was letting me manipulate the situation. She said, "You do not have the authority to question me like this." Laura said, "I have the authority to investigate policy violations and recommend discipline to the board." She said, based on what she had seen, Stephanie had abused her admin access, conducted unauthorized surveillance, entered a vehicle without permission, and filed a false accusation. She said those were serious violations and that the board would be notified immediately. Stephanie said the board would side with her. Laura said, "We will see." She told Stephanie to leave her admin credentials with the front desk on the way out and to consider herself on suspension from committee activities pending a formal hearing. Stephanie grabbed her red folder and stormed out. I heard her say something to the receptionist on her way out, but I could not make out the words. Laura turned to me and apologized. She said the HOA had dropped the ball by giving committee chairs too much access without oversight. She said my gate access would be restored immediately and that any fees or penalties Stephanie had tried to impose would be voided. She also said she would be recommending a full audit of all admin actions taken by Stephanie in the past 6 months. I asked what would happen to Stephanie. Laura said that was up to the board, but based on the evidence, she expected Stephanie would be removed from her committee role and possibly face legal consequences if the police decided to pursue the vehicle entry and the missing wristbands. I thanked Laura and left. I felt like I could finally breathe. But Stephanie was not done. That afternoon, I got a call from a neighbor. She said Stephanie was at the mail kiosk corridor near the front of the development and that she was reading something out loud to a crowd. I grabbed my phone and my binder and drove over. When I got there, Stephanie was standing in front of about a dozen residents holding the printed packet she had brought to Laura's office. She was reading selected lines out loud in a loud theatrical voice. She said the association has determined that a resident engaged in suspicious activity near the visitor lot. She said the resident refused to cooperate with the investigation and became hostile when questioned. She said the resident is now under formal review and residents should avoid engaging with him until the matter is resolved. She did not name me, but she pointed in my direction when I walked up. Several people turned to look at me. One person asked if I was the one she was talking about. I said yes, and that everything she just read was a lie. Stephanie said she had documentation. She held up the packet and said it was all here in black and white. I said show them the documentation then. Stephanie said the details were confidential, but the findings were clear. I said that was convenient. I opened my binder and held it up. I said I also have documentation, and mine includes timestamps, video footage, witness statements, and an audit log showing Stephanie abused her admin access and falsified reports. Several people leaned in to look. I flipped to the page with the driveway footage still showing Stephanie reaching into the car. I said this is Stephanie entering a vehicle without permission on the same night the glove box theft was reported. Stephanie said that photo was edited. I pulled out my phone and played the full video clip on speaker. The audio was clear. The timestamp was visible. Stephanie's face was recognizable. When the clip finished, the crowd was silent. One person said, "Stephanie, what is going on?" Another person said, "This does not look good." Stephanie said the footage was taken out of context and that I was trying to manipulate everyone. She said she was conducting a security check and that she had every right to do that as a committee chair. I said committee chairs do not have the right to enter vehicles without permission. I said that is called breaking and entering. Stephanie said I was twisting the facts. I said the facts are on video. Then someone else spoke up. It was the older man from the clubhouse, the board member. He said he had just come from an emergency board call and that Stephanie was officially suspended from all committee duties pending a formal investigation. He said the board had reviewed the evidence I submitted and that they agreed Stephanie had overstepped her authority and violated multiple policies. Stephanie said that is not true. The board member said it is true, and if you keep making public accusations, the board will refer this to the police. He said the missing wristbands have been located in Stephanie's personal vehicle, and the police are already involved. The crowd reacted. Several people stepped back from Stephanie. One person said, "You stole from the HOA?" Stephanie said, "I did not steal anything." The board member said the wristbands were found in your car during a voluntary search this morning. You signed a consent form. Stephanie said I was pressured into signing. The board member said that is not what the officer noted in the report. He turned to the crowd and said the board is taking this seriously and that anyone who experienced theft or suspicious activity should file a report with management, not with Stephanie. He said Stephanie no longer has any enforcement authority and that residents should treat any further communications from her as unauthorized. Stephanie tried to respond, but people were already walking away. A few lingered to talk to me and the board member. One person apologized for believing the rumors. Another person said they were glad I stood up for myself. Stephanie stood there for a moment holding her packet, her face red. Then she turned and walked to her car. As she opened the door, I took a photo with my phone. I wanted a record of the moment. She saw me and shouted something, but I could not make it out. She got in and drove off. Later that evening, I got an email from Laura. She said the board had voted to remove Stephanie from the social committee effective immediately. She said the police had opened an investigation into the vehicle entry and the missing wristbands. She said the board was also conducting an internal audit of all fines, violations, and access changes Stephanie had processed in the past year to identify any other improper actions. Laura also said the board was implementing new controls to prevent this kind of abuse in the future. Committee chairs would no longer have admin access to resident accounts. All access suspensions would require board approval. All enforcement actions would require documented evidence and a formal hearing process. I replied thanking her for taking it seriously. I also asked about the timeline for the investigation. Laura said it would take a few weeks to complete the audit, but in the meantime, all actions Stephanie had taken were being reviewed and reversed as appropriate. A week later, I got another update. The police had charged Stephanie with misdemeanor theft for the wristbands and trespassing for the vehicle entry. The HOA had also filed a civil complaint seeking restitution for the stolen items and the cost of the audit. The board scheduled a formal hearing to address the theft accusation against me. I showed up with my binder and my witnesses. The hearing lasted about 15 minutes. The board reviewed the evidence, listened to the witnesses, and voted unanimously to dismiss all allegations. They also issued a formal apology and confirmed in writing that I had never been under investigation for theft. Stephanie did not attend the hearing. I heard from a neighbor that she had hired a lawyer and was trying to negotiate a settlement with the HOA to avoid a public trial. 2 weeks after that, the settlement was announced. Stephanie agreed to resign from all HOA positions, pay restitution for the stolen items, and cover the cost of the admin audit. In exchange, the HOA agreed not to pursue additional civil penalties. The criminal charges were still moving forward separately. The board also issued a community-wide email explaining what had happened. They did not name Stephanie directly, but they summarized the theft, the false accusation, the abuse of admin access, and the corrective actions being taken. They apologized to me publicly and thanked the residents who had come forward with evidence and witness statements. The fallout was swift. Stephanie's friends on the board resigned. The board held a special election to fill the vacant committee seats. New policies were put in place requiring checks and balances on enforcement actions. The management company updated their software to log every admin action with timestamps and user IDs. I kept the binder. I added the police report, the board minutes, the settlement summary, and the public apology letter. I figured if anything like this ever happened again, I would be ready. A few months later, I ran into the tow driver at a gas station. He recognized me and asked how everything turned out. I gave him the short version. He laughed and said he knew something was off when Stephanie tried to order that tow. He said he had been in the business long enough to spot someone trying to use him as muscle, and he was not going to be part of it. I thanked him for standing his ground. He said it was nothing, just doing his job the right way. The neighborhood settled down after that. The new committee chairs were reasonable and transparent. The enforcement process was slower but fairer. People started using the management office instead of going through committee chairs for issues, which was how it was supposed to work in the first place. Stephanie moved out about 6 months later. I heard she sold her place and relocated to another part of Tucson. I never saw her again. The whole experience taught me a few things. First, document everything. If I had not kept receipts, timestamps, and video footage, I would have been buried under Stephanie's lies. Second, do not back down when you know you are right. Stephanie counted on me being intimidated and giving up. When I pushed back with evidence, her whole scheme collapsed. Third, bad HOA leaders can do a lot of damage, but they can also be stopped if residents are willing to stand up and demand accountability. Looking back, the funniest part was Stephanie's insistence that she had documentation. She carried that red folder like it was a legal brief, but when Laura finally made her open it, there was almost nothing inside. Just blank forms and a few printed emails with no actual evidence. She had been bluffing the whole time, counting on people being too intimidated to call her on it. And the karma moment that still makes me smile, Stephanie claimed she never touched the wristbands, but someone's doorbell clip showed her carrying the exact bag out of the clubhouse storage closet 2 nights before they were reported missing. She got caught by the same kind of footage she tried to use against me. The board's final report confirmed that Stephanie had been stealing small items from the clubhouse and common areas for months. Pool supplies, office supplies, petty cash from event funds. She had been using her committee role as cover, assuming no one would question her access. When the thefts started getting noticed, she panicked and tried to frame me to deflect attention. The HOA sent a formal notice to their insurance carrier about the theft and the abuse of access. The insurance company responded with an insurance risk warning that made the HOA panic. They implemented a full background check requirement for all committee volunteers and added theft coverage to their policy. The board also hired an outside auditor to review financial controls, which led to even more changes. In the end, management disciplined the staff process that enabled the frame-up. Laura admitted that giving committee chairs admin access without oversight was a mistake, and the management company updated their standard procedures across all the properties they managed. It became a case study for what not to do. As for Stephanie, she was forced to apologize on the record in front of witnesses as part of the settlement. She had to attend a board meeting, read a prepared statement admitting she had falsely accused me and abused her authority, and confirm that I had done nothing wrong. The board recorded the meeting and posted the video to the resident portal. It was humiliating for her, and honestly, it felt like justice. The whole thing was exhausting, but it was also a reminder that the system can work if you fight for it. You have to be willing to gather the evidence, make the calls, show up, and refuse to let someone steamroll you just because they have a title. If you are dealing with an out-of-control HOA leader, here is my advice. Keep records, stay calm, build your case, and do not be afraid to go over their head. Most HOAs have a management company and a board that will step in if you can prove abuse. And if they will not, there are lawyers, regulators, and local officials who will. I am still living at Silver Oak. The new board is solid, the rules are clear, the enforcement is fair, and every time I walk past the clubhouse, I remember the look on Stephanie's face when Laura pulled up that audit log and showed her she had been caught. I will see you in the next story.